What's your favorite scary movie? Mine is Midsummer or Insidious, just an FYI. Now, isn't it scary though to think that some of our favorite horror films are based on true stories and real people? Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel. I'm your host Emily and today we're going to be counting down our list of the top 10 true evil people that inspired Hollywood's scariest movies. So if you're watching this at night, I'd suggest turning a light on. Now let's get on with the list. Number 10, John Wayne Gacy. John Wayne Gacy was known as the Clown Slayer due to his public performances as Pogo the Clown or Patches the Clown personas he had devised prior to the discovery of his crimes. Now, he ended the lives of at least 33 young men and boys in Norwood Park Township, Illinois. Now, typically he would lure a victim to his home and dupe them into donning handcuffs on the pretext of demonstrating a magic trick. He would then take advantage of them and take their lives. Now, the investigation into the disappearance of Des Plaines student Robert Peast led to Gacy's arrest on December 21st, 1978. 26 victims were buried in a crawl space of his home, and 3 others were buried elsewhere on his property, and 4 were discarded in the Des Plaines River. Now, he inspired a little character named Pennywise from the It book, series, and films. Pennywise also preys on the young of Derry, Maine, roughly every 27 years, using a variety of powers that include the ability to shapeshift, manipulate reality, and go unnoticed by adults. Now, overall, clowns can be scary, but with Pennywise being based on a real person, it makes it even more terrifying. Number 9, Ronald Defeo. On the night of November 13th, 1974, 23-year-old Ronald Defeo shot and ended the life of all 6 members of his family. He was then arrested, convicted, and given 6 concurrent life sentences. Then, in December of 1975, George and Kathy Lutz, along with their 3 children, moved into the house and claimed that spooky things were happening. For example, George would wake up at 3:15 a.m. every morning, which was the approximate time Ronald ended his family. Kathy said she would feel a ghostly presence and be embraced by it, and all of this and more caused the family to flee in fear after only staying in the house for 28 days. Now, due to this, demonologist Ed and Lorraine Warren visited the house and set up time-lapse infrared cameras. Now, there have been many films called the Amityville Horror based on this story, and usually it even uses the real people's names in the film and dramatizes the events that took place that night. Number 8, the Manson Family. Charles Manson was a criminal who created a cult called the Manson Family. It was active in California in the late 1960s and early 1970s. Now, the group consisted of approximately 100 followers who lived an unconventional lifestyle and frequently used psychoactive substances. Now, according to group member Susan Atkins, the members of the family became convinced that Manson was the manifestation of Jesus Christ and believed in his prophecies concerning an imminent apocalyptic race war. Now, some of the members committed a series of 9 deaths at 4 locations in July and August 1969. Now, in 1971, Manson was convicted of first-degree homicide and conspiracy to commit homicide for the deaths of 7 people, including film actress Sharon Tate. Now, the prosecution contended that while Manson never directly ordered the deaths, his ideology constituted an overt act of conspiracy. Now, it's said that the movie The Strangers is based on this cult. In the movie, 3 masked individuals randomly target a couple and end their lives without reason or rhyme, just how the Manson family would. Number 7, Danny Rolling. In August 1990, Danny Rolling, aka the Gainesville Ripper, ended the lives of 5 students during a burglary and robbery spree. He mutilated his victims' bodies, decapitating one. He then posed them, sometimes using mirrors. Now, all the victims were petite white brunettes with brown eyes, like Rolling's mother. In November 1991, Danny was charged with 5 counts of homicide, and he claimed that his motive was to become a superstar similar to Ted Bundy. Now, in 1994, before his trial could get underway, Rolling unexpectedly pleaded guilty to all charges. On April 20th, 1994, Rolling was sentenced to death, and Danny actually inspired the movie Scream. Set in the small American town of Woodsboro, Scream's plot follows high school student Sydney Prescott and her friends who become, on the anniversary of her mother's death, the target of a costume serial slayer known as Ghostface. Now, Ghostface often calls and taunts his victims before attacking them, focusing mainly on young females who are alone and vulnerable, much like Rolling did. Like in real life, these students were on high alert and staying in groups. And now, what's ironic about this is that the movie Scream actually inspired high schoolers to end the lives of their classmates, which is just disturbing. Number 6, Alfredo Trevino. You may not know who Alfredo Trevino is, so let me explain. In the early 1960s, medical intern Alfredo was the last person in Mexico to be sentenced with the death penalty. Alfredo was known as Dr. Salazar when he was in prison, but to the outside world he was more familiar as the Wolfman of Nuevo Leon. This doctor was sentenced to death for ending the life of his lover, Jesus Castillo Rangel, and mutilating the body. He is also suspected of ending the lives of several hitchhikers in the late 1950s and 1960s, and was accused of secretly burying his victims' bodies. His sentence was then commuted to 20 years though, and he was not sentenced to death. Now, it seems that Hannibal Lecter from The Silence of the Lambs was based on Alfredo. You see, Thomas Harris had been a journalist in the 1960s, and once he had to meet a gruesomely wounded prisoner, Dykes Askew Simmons, in a prison in Mexico. Treating Simmons was a doctor named Dr. Salazar, whom Harris mistook to be a staff member. While the doctor treated Simmons, the journalist and the doctor had quite an intellectual conversation concerning Simmons' victims, but little did Harris know that the doctor was a criminal himself, and thus he based the story on him. Number 5. Roland Doe. In the late 1940s in the United States, priests of the Roman Catholic Church performed a series of exorcisms on an anonymous boy documented under the name Roland Doe. The boy was the alleged victim of a demonic possession, and the events were recorded by the attending priest. It said after a family death, the family experienced strange noises, furniture moving of its own accord, and ordinary objects such as vases flying or levitating when the boy was nearby. The family then turned to their pastor for help. Now, during the exorcism, the boy allegedly slipped one of his hands out of the restraints, broke a bed spring from under the mattress, and used it as an impromptu weapon, slashing the priest's arm and resulting in the exorcism ritual being halted. When they did another exorcism, it was stated that during the scene, words such as evil and hell, along with other various marks, appeared on the teenager's body. Allegedly, during the litany of the saints portion of the exorcism ritual, the boy's mattress began to shake. Now, the premise of the film The Exorcist is based on this possession case, which truly says how frightening it is. Number 4. The Lake Bodom Slayer. On June 5th, 1960, at Bodom Lake, 4 friends went camping, but only one made it out alive. 3 of them died by stabbing and blunt force trauma to their heads while sleeping inside a tent. The 4th friend was found outside the tent with broken facial bones and stab wounds. Now, despite extensive investigations, the perpetrator was never identified, and various theories on the slayer's identity have been presented over the years. But it remains one of the most infamous unsolved homicides in Finnish criminal history. Now, does that story sound familiar? Well, that's because it's said to have inspired Friday the 13th films and Jason Voorhees. The coincidences get even more eerie because the surviving victim described the slayer as a genuine boogeyman, shrouded in black with glowing red eyes, which sounds absolutely terrifying. Number 3. Sawney Bean. Sawney Bean was said to be the head of a 45-member clan in Scotland in the 16th century that ended the lives of and ate over 1,000 people in 25 years. According to the legend, Bean and his clan members were eventually caught by a search party sent by King James VI. Sawney and his fellow men had their genitalia cut off and thrown into fires, their hands and feet severed, and were allowed to bleed to death, with Sawney shouting his dying words, "It isn't over, it will never be over." Now, after watching the man die, Agnes, his partner, and her fellow women were tied to stakes and burned alive. Now, while there is little historical evidence that confirms or denies Sawney's existence, his myth persists. But it's said that Sawney and his group influenced the film The Hills Have Eyes. This film is about a family on a road trip stranded in the Nevada desert who become hunted by a clan of deformed people who eat other people in the surrounding hills. Number 2. Annabelle. The Annabelle doll is probably one of the best known haunted dolls in history. Bought in an antique shop in 1970, a woman gave a Raggedy Ann doll to her daughter, Donna, who was in nursing school. Now, Donna and her roommate Angie kept coming home to find the doll in different positions and in different locations. The doll began leaving them notes reading help, and a psychic told them that the doll was possessed by the spirit of a girl named Annabelle who had died at the location where their apartment complex had been built. Now, with the doll becoming more and more violent, the girls called Ed and Lorraine Warren, who decided the doll was actually a conduit to hell that a demon was using. 2 exorcisms didn't work, and the Warrens took Annabelle home. Now, the Warrens had a specially made glass and wood case constructed, upon which they inscribed the Lord's Prayer and St. Michael's Prayer. Now, for the rest of his life, Ed would periodically say a binding prayer over the case, ensuring that the sinister spirit and the doll remained good and trapped. So all the Annabelle movies are based on that doll, except the movie doll is porcelain and even more terrifying. Now, there have been 3 separate Annabelle movies, and she's become a staple of the Conjuring universe that will continue to scare me until I die. And coming at number 1 is Ed Gein. Ed Gein was a serial slayer and grave robber. He created costumes, furniture, and other keepsakes from bodies of his victims. While he was only officially convicted of taking the lives of 2 people, Bernice Warden and Mary Hogan, a police raid on his house turned up masks literally made from human faces, a belt of nipples, and a corset created from a skinned torso. Now, to be clear, he never wore these costumes when ending people's lives. Instead, he donned them in the privacy of his home. Now, some masks appeared mummified, almost dried out, while others were more carefully preserved. A few had lipstick applied and looked more lifelike, and 4 had been stuffed with paper and hung on the wall of his bedroom, almost like hunting trophies. Now, Ed was initially found unfit to stand trial and confined to a mental health facility, but by 1968 he was judged competent to stand trial, and he was found guilty of the deaths, but he was found legally insane and was remanded to a psychiatric institution. Now, due to all this, he made a lasting impression on the American psyche and inspired fictional villains such as Norman Bates, Buffalo Bill, and Leatherface. There are many villains based off of him, as he is so iconic. Well, that's all for our list of the top 10 true evil people that inspired Hollywood's scariest movies. Did you know the truth about these movies, and have you ever watched any of them? I think I've watched most of them, but let us know in the comments down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm your host Emily, and we'll see you next time. Peace.